Hello and welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Texas A&M Aggies Live, part of the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Cannon Torres, joined by my lovely co-host, Cameron Honesty. We are here at the start of August. We are so very close to the college football season, everybody, and we are so ready and excited to have these preview shows now that we're getting closer and closer. So today we are going to bring on a special guest covering the Arizona State program. We are going to bring up David Howman of Echo from the Buttes. Welcome in.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do around the Arizona State program, and where everybody can find you. We'll start off with that.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter /X. It's always going to be Twitter to me. I old habits die hard, but at _DH44_. Haven't been as active, but as football season picks up, that ends up changing. And of course, you can find us Echo from the Buttes. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Maybe debuting on TikTok soon. TBD on that. I'm not the one that's hip with that kind of stuff, so we're working through that. But Echo from the Buttes, we cover all things Arizona State athletics. So obviously football is a big one, men's and women's basketball. I'm really proud of the fact that this last year we had somebody in attendance covering every single home women's basketball game. They had a tremendous season. They went to back to the tournament for the first time in 5 years. Big year for them. We cover the baseball program. We cover the hockey program because ASU has a really good hockey team. You wouldn't expect it out in the desert. So we really do as much as we can. And we love Sun Devil athletics, and we try to just, share that love with all of our readers.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what we all try to do, especially me with Aggies Wire at USA Today Sports and everybody. We cover everything. Obviously, A&M had a tremendous volleyball season, winning a national championship. It was a lot of fun to cover those women, and most of that roster was going to be back next season. So yeah, it's always good to encourage women's sports, get more of a national. We'll highlight them in more national aspects of every program. So, but yeah, we're going to start things off with one of the more, I guess, important positions in college football is obviously at quarterback. Arizona State going through a change after Sam Leavitt, who obviously dazzled all of us when he led the Sun Devils to the CFP a couple years back. Had some injury issues, ended up transferring to LSU. He's been one of the most talked about quarterbacks in the SEC. Ranked above a lot of guys. Kind of interesting to me that have played in the SEC before, even though he hasn't taken a snap in the SEC yet. But I get it. He has a very good background. Either way, Arizona State is now inheriting another SEC quarterback who played for Kentucky last season, and Cutter Boley, who Ken and I both know very well. Obviously, he was an interesting guy to watch last season. Kentucky was not a good team, had a really good defense, but they really couldn't do much on offense. But at the end of the year and in several games, including one against, I think, Texas was a big one where he used his legs a lot. Has a very good arm. I would say I would kind of call it a live arm, but at the same time, there's some accuracy issues. Did not have the best receiving core during his time in Kentucky, but was, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, he was recruited by Kenny Dillingham coming out of high school. They have a past relationship there. He believes that he can kind of turn him into that Sam Leavitt type of signal caller and feels like it's a perfect fit in their offensive scheme. But at the same time, Arizona State has a pretty new offensive line that could have some issues in the trenches. And is it a done deal that Cutter Boley is the starter, or is this an ongoing competition that's going to head into fall camp?
Yeah, so nothing's been announced yet at quarterback. I guess a month ago now, they were down in Frisco, Texas for the Big 12 Media Day. And when we were there, Kenny Dillingham did not announce a starter. He said that he's not going to make a decision. He said, we're not going to make a decision until the players know first, which is kind of his way of saying neither of these two quarterbacks, which Cutter Boley, a lot of people assume he'll be the guy. And then they also brought in Mikey Keene, who transferred in from Michigan, didn't really play at Michigan. He was a starter for a couple of years at Fresno State, also a local Arizona guy. So he's really the main competition for Cutter Boley. Basically, the two backgrounds for them, Mikey Keene is kind of your Sam Darnold, if you will. He's going to give you a solid floor, but the ceiling's also going to be a little bit low. And then Cutter Boley is going to be, like you said, he's got the athleticism, he's got the arm talent. He's played in the SEC, so going to the Big 12 might be a little bit easier for him now. definitely the goal is for Cutter Boley to be that guy. But their biggest thing is they want to see, can he get those turnovers down? Can he be a little bit better, keep holding on to the ball? That's a huge thing for Kenny Dillingham. And my guess is probably the week before the season opener, they're going to announce Cutter Boley, and he's going to go and play week 1, and they'll see how he does. And they know that they have Mikey Keene waiting in the wings, that he has a lot of experience. He'll know the scheme very well. He'll be kind of that bus driver type quarterback if things don't work out with Cutter Boley.
Okay, makes perfect sense. I know that seeing the high school production that Jake Fetty has had and watching him in high school as someone who follows the recruiting scene a lot, I was very impressed by the early evaluation that Kenny Dillingham had on him as well. And even there was some buzz earlier in the spring about how many of the reps that Jake Fetty was actually competing with Cutter Boley in. So it's nice to hear at least that Kenny Dillingham hasn't lost a step when it comes to recruiting that position, especially with the talent that he's been able to produce over the past full decade now. So if the Aggies were to see Cutter Boley, what would be his forte that the Aggies are looking to dampen down?
I mean, number one thing with Cutter Boley is, can you get him to keep turning it over like he did at Kentucky? Because you watch the tape, and that's the number one thing where he gets in trouble. But, I mean, his big thing is just he has that raw talent. And, when Sam Leavitt transferred from Michigan State to Arizona State, he didn't play at Michigan State, but a lot of people, he was a 4-star quarterback coming out, and a lot of people felt like this guy has talent. You just got to get in the right system, somebody they're not going to ask him to do everything. Of course, his first year, he's got somebody by the name of Cam Scadaboo. Sam Leavitt didn't have to do a whole lot that first year. As he got more comfortable, you started seeing more of those dazzling plays, which is why LSU just paid a whole lot of money to get him. So the hope is that Kenny Dillingham kind of works his magic again, and you have all of those traits with Cutter Boley, things that Kenny Dillingham looks for in a quarterback. At the Big 12 Media Day, he specifically mentioned he thinks Boley doesn't get enough credit for his athleticism. That's something that's huge, especially like you guys mentioned with some new pieces on the offensive line. There's a lot of guys that are stepping into starting roles that have been kind of waiting in the wings the last couple of years. They do really pride themselves with their offensive line coach on his development ability. We have seen that a lot. Maxie Honachor this past year was a first-round draft pick. A year ago, nobody expected that to happen. That's a testament to their development program on the offensive line. But you're still going to need somebody with that athleticism, and that's where, especially against a team like A&M, it's going to come in handy. Boley's going to have to be quick to bail out of that pocket, or it's going to be a really, really long day for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I expect that RPO-heavy offense going into that game because
I would imagine.
Yeah, we do our film study usually a week before with each opponent, and I'm going to be honest with you, Cutter Boley is a fun player to watch because I watched a lot of Kentucky football last year for some reason. I guess they were always a late game. I'd turn them on.
It was his pet team, David. It really was.
Yes.
Yeah, they're kind of funny, and honestly, there were moments where I'm like, I agree with you. There's a lot of raw talent there. Like the dude can throw, and when he's in rhythm, he really is a rhythm quarterback. If he sees an opening, he's going to use his legs, and if he sees a small window, he's going to throw a pretty accurate pass over the middle of the field. Obviously, when it comes to not having an established wide receiver room, because I always kind of do that equation of you put him with, like an A&M wide receiver room last year, or obviously going into this season where it's complete with the speed, with the length, all those things that you need in order to reach your full potential. Who knows what we'll see? And that's where I'm kind of getting to. Obviously, losing Jordan Tyson, who's one of my favorite players going to the draft. I think he's going to be a perfect fit with New Orleans. But not having that number one guy, where obviously Boley could have used that going into the season. Who do you think is going to step up in the number one role? I think obviously Omarion Miller is kind of the guy I'm looking at. Who else has stood out? And do you think this wide receiver core is going to be competent enough and elevate Cutter Boley's game if he is named a starter?
Yeah, I mean that's their whole plan. And Kenny Dillingham was he's been very transparent about that going back to spring ball. He made it very clear. Financially, they could have kept Sam Leavitt. They could have ponied up what LSU gave them or what other schools were offering them. But their mindset was, well, we could blow all of our NIL on keeping Sam Leavitt, and then we don't surround him with anything else to work with. Or we can go get another quarterback that probably doesn't cost as much, like Cutter Boley, and then the money that we save on that then go out and get a bunch of great receivers. So Amarian Miller was one of those coming from Colorado, which Jordan Tyson also came from Colorado. I guess there's something in the water about receivers going from Colorado to Tempe. So, Miller was, I think he was the 4th rated transfer in the portal. I guess it depends on which site you were looking at, but up there in the rankings for sure. They also got Reed Harris from Boston College, who I think he's officially listed at 6'5". He's big. He's got that length. And he was really, really good at Boston College last year, one of the few bright spots for that team. And they feel really good about both of those guys. They were both top 10 transfer players, not just at wide receiver, just top 10 total. And they were able to get both of those guys. They also got Raiden Vinesbright, who's another local kid from the Arizona area. He was playing at Washington the last couple of years. And he kind of went a little underrated just because you had those two big names in Miller and Harris. I think between those 3 guys, those are probably your top 3 receivers. Vinesbright has a little bit of wiggle to him, and I think there's a lot of potential to deploy him in some unique ways. They also have a couple of guys coming back from the last year. Eric Usadia was somebody who really came on as the season went along. He's smaller, and he's kind of the textbook like deceptive speed. You see him out there moving, and it's not until he gets in the open field that you're just like, oh, okay, like he can scoot, but he's got the moves, and he had a few big plays for ASU last year. Kind of came out of nowhere, and so they really, really like him. They're going to get him involved, and they also feel very good about the tight end group as well. Kamari Anderson also transferred from Kentucky 2 years ago now. He's going to assume the starting role. They have a couple of other tight ends behind them that they really like this tight end group, and they're going to use them a lot, not only in the pass game, but also in setting up the run game and building their play action and their RPO off of that with those tight ends too.
Yeah, I've had a lot of film study over the past couple of months on the Big 12 just because I think it's one of the more fun just conferences overall to watch. I really just get to see hard-nosed football every single week when it comes to that. That's why I watched a lot of it this past season. So I got kind of up close and personal with a lot of these teams. But when I now look at where Arizona State is with their offensive line, they're losing a bunch of absolute talent along that line compared to this past season. And like you said, it is a lot of the next guy up mentality. They did bring in a couple of transfers. I know they brought in a kid from Georgia Tech. I know they have a redshirt junior coming up. It's kind of his turn to be the leader along that line. So can you tell us the state of which this offensive line is for Arizona State? And if it's not too much, where are they kind of gettable right now in your mind? Or where are their strengths?
Yeah, I mean, I think their strengths largely is going to come in, or at least ideally is going to be in their run game and the way that they can run the ball. That was a big thing, obviously, when Cam Scatterbo was there. They were a downhill running team. Having a guy like Scatterbo obviously makes that a little bit easier. Last year, they took a couple of swings on some portal guys, didn't quite work out. They also had Kyson Brown, who was Scatterbo's main backup. He won the starting job week 1, dealt with some injuries, and only played a couple of games throughout the year. He's back. He's feeling a lot more confident. He was named to their Pat Tillman Leadership Council, so he's a big leader in that locker room. They brought in a couple new transfers this year as well. It's going to be more of a running back by committee approach this year. It was similar to what their plan was last year before injury struck. But on the offensive line, they want to be the aggressors at the point of attack. They want to be a downhill running team. They want to be able to beat guys off the snap. They're going to use a lot of different power running concepts. That's really Marcus Arroyo is the offensive coordinator. Obviously, Kenny Dillingham is very involved in the offense too. Both of them have that mentality of we're going to get guys off the line. You're going to move down the field. You're going to get to the second level, take on those linebackers, and that's where they create jump plays. So that's their identity. That's what they want to be. Their biggest weakness or potential area for exploitation is going to be that pass protection, especially on the edges with those tackles. And part of that is just the new guys coming in. Part of that is having everything synced up with the quarterback, whether it's Cutter Boley, whether it's Mikey Keene, whether it's Jake Fetty, whoever it is, it's going to be somebody new. And just knowing as a quarterback, how are my tackles responding if they get beat out to the edge or there's an inside move? And for them, like, where do I need to be to give Cutter Buller the opportunity to escape? And I think there's going to be probably some early growing pains there. Playing A&M week 2 does not help. Doing it on the road doesn't help either. They're going to be in silent count, I imagine, the entire game. And then the other thing too, like, as much as we are looking forward to, or depending on your level of confidence in the team, not looking forward to the A&M game. Then the week after, they also go out to London to play Kansas, and so they're also there's weird schedule things that they have to take into account leading into this game too, of how quick of a turnaround relative to the travel out there. And I know that was a big talking point for them at the media days as well, was like, how do we plan for going to College Station and then going to London right after? And that's a big part of what they are trying to figure out, because it's unprecedented territory.
Yeah, they've lost a couple of like key pieces, with Maxi Hennecourt being the main one from this past season, right? I mean, he's a first round draft talent, which very impressive from Kenny Dillingham to keep consistently putting some draft talent in every year now. I know in 2025 he only had Cam Scadaboo being one of the main ones, but this past season putting 4 guys in the NFL, not as shabby, right? So we are definitely looking forward to that. I mean, 3 out of the 4 were from or it was 2 and 2, so 2 offensive, 2 defensive players. So we're going to kind of transition over to the defensive side. I think we've kind of hit on the spots we need to on that offensive line. But Cameron, do you have our next question that we've had?
Yeah, obviously this is going to be something we ask any guest, because Marcel Reed, A&M starting quarterback, coming back for his second full starting season. We all really believe this is the season he's going to kind of put it all together, get back to being that full dual threat option, not just being a pocket passer, not just taking off when he absolutely has to, but a great mix there. And so for Brian Ward, who I really respect him as a defensive coordinator, I think he's going to do a pretty good job with a relatively new unit this season. But how is he going to obviously contain Marcel Reed? Because personally, I believe these first 2 weeks, it's going to be a 50-50 split. Holman Wiggins, A&M's new OC, he's going to want to run the ball, but if there's an opening there and Reed can just get through the hole and slide and pick up 5 to 6 yards and keep the offense moving, he's going to do it. And he's going to have one of his usual impressive scrambles and just get out of the pocket and really embarrass some safeties on his way to probably like a 15-yard pickup. That's going to happen, especially if your defense is just not set and not I guess game planning for his athleticism, because I think going back to last season, he was a pocket passer. He really utilized his wide receivers. He's going to do the same this year. But my question and Ken's question is, how is Ward going to, keep him in the pocket? Are they going to use a spy? Do you think they're just going to hope that their defensive line can get some contain inside and force him to throw? But, I don't know, because who is that spy going to be? Because, I mean, I'm looking at this defense, and these are all new names to me, and I'm like, I don't know, man. They're going to have to find somebody who can kind of keep up with them, because I know in A&M's practices, even starting on Wednesday, they probably used Dalton Brooks. I would
most likely was Dalton Brooks as a runner.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of their spy target, at free runner safety. I know that Arizona State took in a transfer from Colorado State who is one of the more sure tacklers in collegiate athletics right now. So can you kind of give us what is Brian Ward going to do in Aggie land on September 12th?
My guess is he's going to start by just praying. It's because, to your point, there are a lot of new faces, especially at the positions where you would kind of think, if we're going with a spy, those are our guys. Owen Long's the guy you mentioned. He actually led the nation in tackles this last year. Really, really impressive. My guess is probably he's not the one you want spying on Marcel Reed, just because I don't think the speed quite matches up. All due respect to Mr. Long. He's probably going to be more so. They're going to use him to, if Holman Wiggins does want to run the ball and pound the rock, he's going to be the guy to try and wrap that up after they get past that line of scrimmage. I think more likely, I don't think we'll see a ton of spy. Brian Ward does like to mix things up a lot like that when he faces these mobile quarterbacks. He'll kind of mix it up with the spy. He'll mix it up with some contain on the defensive line. Typically speaking, in a neutral situation, his scheme is it's very much going to be like one gap penetration on the defensive line. Guys get upfield, get into the backfield, make that quarterback uncomfortable. Doesn't always work against a guy like Marcel Reed. And so I think there's going to be first quarter probably going to be a lot of feeling him out kind of thing of like how trigger happy is he on tucking in and running? Like, does he want to stay in the pocket? What's he seeing on the back end with the coverage? Brian Ward, I think probably his strength as a play caller is just his ability to disguise the coverages. I think that's probably where he wins the most in this game is just making Marcel Reed take a moment, second guess what he's seeing, and then hoping that his guys can get his defensive lineman can get there in the meantime. Beyond that, I mean, it's kind of a pick your poison because if you do use a spy, then you're sacrificing some in the coverage level. He's going to find open guys. It's just going to happen. If you only rush 4, which usually is his MO, you're going to have a bad time. He's going to break contain. He's going to get out there and make some plays. So I think really their biggest thing is more so playing the mental games and seeing like, okay, how much have you matured? How much, like basically testing that relationship with Holm and Wiggins too of how quickly can the two of you adapt now that you're kind of in a new setting with him as the play caller as well. So, not one where we're coming in with the superior talent advantage, but something where they're going to try to just win with sheer coaching ability.
Yeah, cloud coverage is probably my best guess. Just get that guy in the flat and then just cover the deep thirds.
Yeah.
And just, let Reed try to pick you off in the middle of the field, which, you can kind of watch the film last year in losses to Texas, obviously Miami in the college football playoff. There were issues where, Miami really did a great job in coverage of just forcing him to throw very, questionable passes in terms of trusting his receivers. And there have been issues with Reed down the stretch of seasons where, something's just off. And usually when he can just use his legs to pick up a first down and or make the easy pass, there have been times where he trusts a little too much going downfield and it gets him in trouble a little bit. But it is going to be one of those situations, though, early in the year where you can probably get him on some mistakes because you're going to see around the league there's going to be a lot of good quarterbacks that are going to look like they suck for the first 2 games because the game plan is just run the ball in the first game, just get out with a win, and then you really start to scheme up when Texas faces Ohio State. And obviously this is kind of Arizona State's Ohio State in a way, go on the road to Cal Field for an 11 a.m. game where you just got to kind of throw it all out there and say, look, we think if we can disguise some things and mess with his head a little bit, we might have a shot. Reed is as we've said on the show, a high variance quarterback. So if you get him on a bad week, you do have a chance there. If you get him on a very good week, it could be, 28-7 by the fourth quarter and, Reed's thrown like 3 touchdowns. It's very interesting to watch him. So not saying Arizona State's going to, I'm predicting what they're going to do in coverage, but cloud coverage is probably where I could see Ward going with just to have that kind of safety zone of we're going to cover the flat. You can't get these easy throws. You're going to have to throw in the middle of the field. And thank God A&M has, some of the best wide receivers in the country, especially Mario Craver, who's very, very good in the middle of the field. So it's
pretty good.
There's that.
Yeah.
So.
Now, with Arizona State losing Keith Abney, how well does this secondary match up with the Aggies wide receiver core after losing that talent? Could the Aggies have a surefire advantage somewhere along that? Or where do you see Arizona State using that blanket coverage? Mainly zone, because that's what I've seen Coach Brian do most of the time is that zone, maybe some delayed blitzes up the middle. But how well can that secondary match up with A&M?
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be the biggest early test for this new secondary because a lot of them are either similar to the offensive line. They're either guys that they brought in or it's guys that have been waiting in the wings that are moving on up. I know Rodney Bimage is somebody that everybody in Tempe is high on. At Big 12 Media Day, multiple players ASU players that were there unprompted would just bring up his name and say this guy's not getting enough credit. He's going to have a big year. I know the staff has been high on him. He's also a Texas kid that they brought in. I believe it was Kenny Dillingham's first full offseason as the head coach was when he got him in there, and they've just kind of been growing him, developing him, and I'm sure him being back in Texas in the big national spotlight, he's going to really want to step up and make some plays. They're really, really high on him. Also, Brian Ward makes a lot of use of kind of big nickel sets. He likes having multiple safeties out there. Montana Warren's a guy that has been gradually getting more playing time. He's expected to be a starter. They haven't decided like if he's going to be the nickel or if he's going to be one of their like traditional safeties. Similarly, they brought in a transfer in Lyric Rawls, who's going to get a lot of work and being able to move into that hybrid role. And then they also have a safety. His name's Adrian Wilson, which Arizonans know another Adrian Wilson very well. He goes by the nickname of Boogie, so everyone's calling him Boogie just to keep him separate. But they're very, very excited about that back end and the way that Ward likes to move those guys around. I think he has a lot more positional flexibility in that safety group too. I think that's going to empower him to change up a lot of those matchups too. So it's not necessarily going to be, well, Rodney Bimbish needs to cover this guy. It's all of these different guys are going to kind of take turns and they can change the way that the defense is looking pre-snap. Again, going back to those pre-snap mental games with Marcel Reed of, okay, well, now it's Montana Warren. Before it was Bimbish. After this is going to be Rawls. And so it gives him more creativity in disguising it pre-snap and what he shows post-snap. But the most blunt answer is going to be tough.
Fair enough. I think that when you look at this game in a vacuum, both teams are coming in second game of the season. Sometimes both teams are still shaking off the rust. Maybe Arizona State has everything clicking after that first game. We've seen it happen before where a team just gets hot after either week 0 or week 1, and they're already on a roll, even with a couple of players still kind of getting the hang of the ropes. Maybe Cutter Boley is that guy where he's just starting to piece it all together, finally on the field in a new set. We've seen players transfer before and immediately have some success because they just needed a breath of fresh air, right? So we've seen that happen before, even at Arizona State. I think that when you take a look at what Kenny Dillingham has done there with the transfers he's brought in before, they've been able to produce pretty well. I think that when I look back, I have one more question about the defensive side. So if an A&M fan were looking at this defensive team that has lost a couple of major players over the past 1 or 2 seasons for Arizona State, if they're walking into Kyle Field and saying, okay, which one of these guys warming up, which number should I be looking at? Which player has the best chance to disrupt A&M's offense? Is along the defensive line, the linebacker core, or the secondary? Which number are they looking at? Which player are they looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one guy that they'll be circling, that the Aggies players and coaches will be circling, the fans should too, is CJ Fight, their defensive tackle. He's been quietly one of the best interior defensive linemen in the Big 12 last couple of years, and he's kind of one of those players where, like, when you turn on the tape and you really watch him, you see like NFL caliber talent. He just doesn't have the box score to match up with it. A lot of that is due to they run a really deep defensive line rotation, and he also they do a lot of they do a lot of 2-gap and run support, so he really doesn't get a whole lot of those splash plays, just due to the nature of how they play the run. This year, they're really kind of, again, after all the players they had in the draft, first-round picks, everybody's kind of looking at Arizona State of who's going to be the next draft first-round pick off of this team. Kenny Dillingham, Brian Ward, they've been saying like CJ Fight is one of those guys. He has the body type, he has the size, he has the strength. I don't know if he's technically the strongest in terms of like lifting numbers, but he's definitely up there. He's been, I think this is his 4th year now at Arizona State, or 4th year playing. I know with the eligibility, the numbers kind of get a little weird, but he's been with the program as long as Kenny Dillingham is my point. And this year is going to be the year he really becomes the leader on that defensive line. I think that a lot of their rush plans is probably going to be built around getting him one-on-one matchups, and then forcing the offensive line to kind of suck in on him and free up things up for their edge rushers. So that's I think where a lot of it is going to start with them defensively is CJ fights our big war daddy. Let's let him go to work and go from there.
Makes perfect sense.
Yep, and he'll be facing 4 new offensive line starters for A&M. So that'll be interesting because, I mean, I could easily see them moving him around on the weakest link. We all think that the guards will be pretty steady, obviously former SEC starters. But there will be moments of adjustment and, just, a lot of these guys, when it comes to communication on the line, maybe things get screwed up with the first 2 weeks and you got to get somebody else in there. And that is a positional battle to watch for sure, because A&M has had some trouble in years past, going back to like the South Carolina game. Some of the better interior defenders have wreaked havoc. And if you get right up the middle, Marcel Reed is in trouble, and he's had a lot of negative plays in those situations. So that might be an advantage. We'll see, because obviously when the Aggies kick off season against Missouri State, that's going to be one of the areas where all of us are watching. Is this offensive line, as experienced and steady as Mike Elko is saying it is, or is this going to be very problematic and potentially hurt A&M down the stretch? But that's going to be fun to watch. I kind of love those matchups more than anything. And I think a lot of people put a lot of attention on quarterback play and stuff like that. But you can't block, and some guys just giving your guard or your center a lot of problems, it's going to screw everything up, and it's going to force you to change your game plan up. So,
yeah, David, looks like we are out of time for this one right now, but we cannot thank you enough for coming on the show tonight. You have been a rock star already, even in the 30 minutes that we've had you on. So thank you very much. Where can they find you?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me on. It was a blast talking about it. I'll tell you real quick. The last time I remember, the vivid memory I have of ASU A&M was 2015, when ASU was coming off their first ever consecutive 10-win seasons, and Todd Graham, their coach at the time, he said, "This is the best team I've ever coached." Expectations were sky high. Myles Garrett, week 1, just tees off back like
Christian Kirk.
It felt like he had like 10 sacks in that game. I'm sure it wasn't after that much, but
that was the Myles Garrett and Deshaun Hall game.
And Christian Kirk also had a huge game, which he was from Arizona, and that's all anyone talked about is we let this kid leave, and then he's gets like 200 yards and a punt return touchdown. So I'm hoping this game goes better than that one for me.
This is a 10-year revenge story in the making.
Era,
yeah. But so hopefully we at least have a competitive game regardless of outcome. But you can find me and me trying to purge those memories on Twitter at _DH44_, and you can find my coverage and the rest of our team's coverage online at echofromthebuttes.com, and all of our different socials on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky. People that are on Blue Sky, we're on there too. So come join us, have fun, see this game from the Sun Devil perspective, and we'll see what happens.
Sweet.
Hey, it's a hell of a coaching matchup in terms of minds, and Mike Elko and Kenny Dillingham, that's for sure. Two of the brightest football minds you have in college football. So
along with all those socials, his links will be down below in the description of the show as well. So David, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah. So
it's awesome.
It's good. Even going through everything and look at the matchups, and in terms of obviously focusing on Cutter Boley, because we kind of know what he brings to the table from an athleticism standpoint. Is he going to be more of a dual threat quarterback? In terms of, especially early in the season, is he going to have to be more of a dual threat quarterback because of his offensive line? That's probably just going to be more of a run blocking unit because pass protection is going to be spotty. Who knows? But I'll say this: it's going to be a very, very hot afternoon in Kyle Field, and it's kind of funny because I have no idea how this game's going to go until I see them play. Obviously, their season opener, but a lot to be excited about. And David did a good job there. So. We're going to obviously finish the show, not start off. Today, obviously, Mike Elko spoke for the first time before fall camp. A lot of the expectations coming into this press conference where he's just going to give a general overview, which he did, but obviously giving one of the biggest, announcements that was kind of trickled at SEC Media Days following junior linebacker Damian Sanford's brutal lower body injury during the spring game. Many of us thought that he was going to miss at least the first half of the 26 season. Well, he might actually start during the season opener based on what Elko said today. I mean, he said, look, Sanford is on track to see the field as soon as we kick off. He did obviously say, and credit to Carter Carroll's volunteer, he was at the press conference, who basically asked, is this going to be full go or is this going to be more of a snap count situation? He said, obviously, we're not going to have him, go full bore if he's not completely ready. But the fact is, their star linebacker could be back to start the season. And that is one of the biggest updates, more positive updates for this team, because he is highly regarded as one of the best defensive players in the SEC. Many believe he's the best defensive player on A&M's roster. I mean, I'm just shocked. That's why I couldn't really get through that, because looking at how he got injured, the pain he was in, getting carted off, I for sure thought he was going to miss 5 to 6 games. And the fact that, both of us kind of thought maybe this recovery would speed up. Obviously, A&M has some of the best doctors in the area. Tommy Moffitt is one of the best strength and conditioning coaches, helping him, get along and speed up that recovery process. The fact that he said he was out of the boot. Obviously, when we saw him at SC Media Days, he was back to running. Maybe there was a possibility, and now Elko confirming that. And if you can get him back even in a limited, capacity, man, that is going to help this defense become one of the top defenses in the SEC, because we know how important he is, especially on third down, especially in terms of quarterbacking that defense, how important he's going to be from a communication standpoint. Obviously, Noah McHale, who's only a sophomore, who's going to end up being one of their starters, and Ray Coney, who, as experienced as he is with his last season at Tulsa, racking up over 100-plus tackles, this is still his first season with Texas A&M, so having somebody with experience on the field to start the season is massive.
And you and I have talked ad nauseum about the linebacker rotation without Damian Sanford being in there and how much of an impact a lot of the other guys could have, because you and I have said that they're going to have to rotate out some guys. That's just how it's going to have to be without Damian Sanford. But with him potentially being back for that opener, I mean, we could be seeing at a fully healthy defense under Mike Elko to start the season. That's just speculation. And to be honest, maybe he should be able to take the full amount of time. If he's not fully 100% ready to go for that season opener, should there be a conversation of him even trying, right? So
yeah,
I think that the staff is going to err on the side of caution when it comes to him, because of how important he is to that rotation, especially in a nickel defense with the linebackers being so they're having to shoulder so much of the load.
Coverage duties.
Yeah, because of how the nickel defense is run, we've seen A&M have lackluster games when it comes to the rush defense because of how the linebackers have had to be. I mean, we've talked about how in recent years, Scooby Williams and Torrey York have been very, very good for them, but they're no longer with the program, right? I mean, notwithstanding with 5 for 5 being a thing and all these speculations about all these other teams grabbing their old players. But now that we have Mike Elko talking about Damian Sanford being potentially back, it adds another layer to this cake that we didn't have earlier. We thought he was going to have to miss a couple of games.
Yeah, and I mean, it shows just, again, a testament to this athletic training staff. I mean, and his doctors in the area, and just, I mean, I don't get it. I really don't get it, because that looked like one of the most serious injuries. I honestly, when he got hurt, I thought his season was over. I honestly did. First glance, I was like, oh crap, he's gonna miss the entire year. So it is one of those situations where it's just, okay, but yeah, you can hear an echo.
I can hear a very big echo if I'm talking. So, but I think your point stands. is just like Damian Sanford could be one of the more massive pieces of this defense. And I know that when we're heading towards the like opening of the season, we're talking about guys like Tafik Bayard, who we're going to bring up later on because of the presser that was today, which I mean, they should be starting their open practices tomorrow. So you may see media pictures and videos of all the media people that we're going to be able to go out to those free practices tomorrow. But you'll be able to see just how intense those trainings are going to be and how big the depth that they're going to have along the defensive side. I've talked a lot about how Tamarian Watkins could be a freshman, like a freshman just all-around player for them if needed to be along the depth. They brought him in to be that hybrid safety linebacker. He gained over 20 pounds during the offseason as a freshman, and that's credit to Tommy Moffitt. Micah could talk today about how massive it is for Tommy Moffitt to still be with this program, and he has the legendary pedigree, has won championships with LSU, and so with guys like Tommy Moffitt to be able to bring in these mentality, and I think Mike Elko said it's like basically 50% of what the culture is kind of instilled and started with Tommy Moffitt is just, it goes a long way for them to go into Q4 or this fall camp for them.
Yeah, and on in terms of the positional battles and stuff like that, he did get into a couple discussions, especially with the backup quarterback situation. Obviously, both you and I believe that Brady Hart, who going into his second full season, is going to serve as the number 2 quarterback. Freshman Helmet Kasuga, made some strides during spring. Kind of looks the part. Likely needs at least a year of development. And then Eli Morkos, who we don't see him as the number 2 option. Obviously, Elko did kind of throw him into the conversation just to get everybody a chance. I still think it's going to be Brady Hart. I think he showed during the spring game that he has what it takes. I still think he needs to add a lot of weight. He's very slender for 6'4". He's somebody who, if he gets hit pretty hard, he could just be out of the game, like that type of situation. So that is a little worrisome. Look, when you lose Miles O'Neill, obviously him transferring to North Carolina, you're losing that depth and experience. So you got to rely on somebody. They're a big fan of what Brady Hart brings from a football IQ standpoint. Obviously, he's a pretty accurate passer. Had those 2 great passes to Isaiah Horton and Ashton Bethel-Roman, really layering that throw to Ashton Bethel-Roman during the spring game. So he's got what it takes physically and mentally, but it's just, you got to keep adding to that repertoire. So, and he could be on his way to becoming A&M starting quarterback, because we've also discussed that if he is the number 2 guy, he is somebody they can trust, and they go into the offseason, maybe Marcel Reed declares to the NFL draft. If he does, either way, if Marcel Reed is not coming back, they're going to be in a situation where, obviously Jace Johnson, their 27 commit, is coming in, but he's not going to be ready to start. Is Brady Hart your guy? If he is, you don't have to go into the transfer portal and get a quarterback. So, and I guarantee A&M fans are going to be very either mad or okay with that decision, because I think there's still a large swath of Aggie fans who, maybe don't fully believe in Marcel Reed. They wanted somebody else, whatever. But this is going to be one of those situations where if he is your number 2 guy, you're probably going to have to stick with him and trust him going into the offseason and hope that early in these games that you can maybe get a big lead against Missouri State, possibly Arizona State, have a chance for him to get on the field, refine his game even more, especially with this wide receiver unit. So I think this is a very important position battle, because we have seen Marcel Reed is very durable. Like he's going back to, all the A&M quarterback issues. Kellen Mond was the only guy who could stay healthy. Now Marcel Reed has kind of dethroned him in a way. Even after he got hurt against Texas, still came back in the game. I still don't think he was 100% healthy coming back into the game. That kind of contributed to his poor play. But you got to have a healthy number 2, and you got to have somebody you can trust, especially with a first-year OC. You're on mute.
I remember back to that Texas game where it looked immediately bad when he got injured, and we saw a series where we thought that Miles O'Neill was going to have to come in for the rest of the game, and Marcel Reed said, "Hey, if we're going to lose this game, we're going to lose this game doing it how we came into the game with, right?" So we had seen some mild success going into that drive, but it was going to be a fight either way. And with Marcel Reed having that health and him being able to be in this strength and conditioning program for now another offseason, I do wonder how that is going to pay dividends for him, but how it also pays dividends to the QB room behind him. Like Mike Elko said, that Brady Hart is going to start fall camp as QB2 with Eli Morkos and Keelan Kasuga both, giving him a run for their money, right? So what that kind of tells me in coach speak is that Brady Hart, it's his job to lose. And he's had that QB2 for a while. I know they had Jacobs, this past year. They had Miles O'Neill. It's a different QB room now. And with the QBs behind Marcel Reed, I think Marcel Reed is the only one in the room right now that offers the specific play style he does. A lot of the other QBs in there with the other, freshman QBs, Heumann is a bigger body guy, while Brady Hart is one of those field general / pocket passer kind of guys who's wanting to be able to be as accurate as possible. We saw it a little bit in the Sanford game when he was able to play this past season. I am interested to see this fall camp if Brady Hart is able to take another step, just so you have that extra layer of insurance if Marcel Reed does need to take a couple of plays out with injury.
Yeah, it's a big dice roll there because, like we said, we have no idea what A&M's quarterback situation is going to be after this season, because even Marcel Reed was asked about this during SEC Media Days and said, we'll see what happens. And he's right. I mean, because if he has a really good season and he's projected as a third, fourth round NFL draft pick with a future as a QB2 and a developmental quarterback in the NFL, or if he's has an average season and they tell him you're going to go undrafted, does he come back for a final season? We just don't know. Like, that's the thing. So they got to prepare ahead of time. And flipping him from Michigan, who obviously has done a very good job developing quarterbacks. They have a type, and a lot of that is that football IQ, someone who's a fast learner, somebody who can just go into any system and fit and is accurate and is trustworthy, which is the biggest thing. But again, he's got to get bigger. Like, he's got to get bigger, because if he doesn't get bigger, I mean, I remember Brooks, I think it's Brooks Austin, who was watching the film and said, this guy's a quarterback in the SEC just by looking at him, because you got to get some strength on it. You got to get some muscle, because you're going to get hit and it's going to hurt and you're going to have to sustain those blows. That's been the criticism of Marcel Reed. So if this is an investment, he's going to really have to work on that going into the summer, because in terms of mechanics and everything else, Hart could be the starter going forward. It's just, this is a very, very big season for him, because this role, we've all watched Friday Night Lights, the show, and saw what happened. Obviously, that was a fictional television program, but injuries happen early in the year. You have to be ready to play. I mean, even though it doesn't happen as much as we've seen as it has in the past, like, fall camp injuries happen, knock on wood, but you got to be ready. So if this is a battle for him to lose, that's a good sign that he's already done enough in the coaching staff's eyes to really take that spot.
Yeah. Where do you want to go with next with how Mike Elko's presser went?
So I think the quote discussing the secondary very, very interesting to me. Him calling it an SEC secondary, it's basically saying maybe the past secondaries weren't up to snuff in terms of what you expect in the conference, especially, looking at Alabama and Georgia's history and all these top teams. Texas obviously has always had great secondaries. They have a ton of talent going into the season. Finally having that depth, adding Ricky Gibson at cornerback from Tennessee, adding Tawfiq Byard from Colorado at safety, returning your top two safeties, returning Des Ricks as your number one quarterback. Obviously, this provides so much depth and starting level talent to the point where you feel so confident about this group that you're going to get into a situation early in the year where you just feel so comfortable with what you put out in the field that you don't have to worry about big plays anymore like you did last year at the end of the season, because Marcus Radcliffe has refined his game. Dalton Brooks has seemingly refined his game, working on speed, wanting to play more physical, something he talked about today. And if this is the type of defense that kind of embodies that Mike Elko defensive spirit and what we've seen again from those elite SEC secondaries, this is probably the strength of the team right now, I would say, outside of the wide receiver unit. I kind of said that in an article today because Elko is a secondary coach in his background. This is where he made his kind of, it's his bread and butter, as they say, when he was moving up in the coaching ranks, becoming a defensive coordinator. He's developed a lot of current NFL safeties and cornerbacks. So I'm not surprised. I just think he's not trying to give them flowers yet because we haven't played games. But at the same time, he feels really, really good, especially at cornerback where they had a lot of issues in years past. Will Lee was their number one guy, and then he kind of struggled last year, but still was a fourth-round pick because he did what he had to do, and he was still very sticky in coverage as the number 2. And Des Ricks completely changed his game, becoming the number 1 cornerback, and they believe he's going to be that guy this year again. Whereas, again, Ricky Gibson, you talk to any Tennessee beat writer or any fan in general, they're going to really miss this guy because he missed all but one game last season, but he was considered a rising star on that roster. And coming into a defense where they're going to play a lot of man coverage, where he's already excels and can also play zone at a high level, you've got 2 of the best cornerbacks in the SEC, so you're feeling pretty darn good about your starting unit. And the only battle right now is at nickel, where Bryce Anderson, who obviously played at safety last year, is going to be competing with, well, Bravion Rogers is one of those guys.
Jordan Shaw's in there.
Jordan Shaw is one of those guys as well, yeah. So, and Bravion Rogers played a little bit last year, mostly a special teams guy, former blue chip prospect, so very talented, very long, and can play that position at a high level. So I think at nickel, which is so important in that man-centric scheme, having depth at nickel is huge. So
it's a very, very big thing. And now when I look back at how the transfer portal went, getting Bryce Anderson back is as big as you could probably expect.
Yeah, I'm telling you, because when you lose a guy like Tyreek Chappelle, I think only those of us who cover A&M, obviously A&M fans who play close attention, if you ask Billy Lucci, who's the biggest insider of any A&M media member, he would tell you the same thing. Like, going into every season, Tyreek Chappelle's health status was massive.
It was a big thing, especially the last 2 seasons he was with A&M.
Yeah, because when he was not on the field, I mean, they had problems.
There was a big gap in where the skill depth would be at nickel.
Because you have, his defense is so refined that you need those players that know everything that's coming, right? Like they're ready for any change, and at a position where you got to have sticky coverage against usually that slot wide receiver who's going to kill you in the middle of the field, similar to like a Mario Craver for A&M, and you don't have somebody who can stick in coverage to those guys, it's going to be a long day. So they at least know that having a guy like Bryce Anderson, who is one of the more athletic players on this roster. A lot of people forget he was a dual threat quarterback coming out of high school. The reason he changed to safety was because he was such a good athlete, and they believe he can step up and compete and at least be a rotational nickel for this team this season. And the fact is, he knows this defense, so it's continuity, which is huge. So I think I do believe him there. And I mean, if you're an A&M fan who, again, has not, and I don't blame you guys because everybody has their lives. This is our careers. So we pay very close attention to these things, but that should make you feel pretty good, right? Because if the back end of the defense is solid, you don't really have to worry about it throughout the season outside of injuries. And then that puts more of the focus on the defensive line, which I don't think he talked too much today about the defensive line, which may be a good sign, to be honest, because
probably is a good sign. I think that when you don't have a lot of things to talk about, especially when it probably feels more repetitive to him now going into the fall, which he did speak on a little bit. It was just like, hey guys, I don't know really what you want me to tell you. We've been doing this now for 3 years since I've been a head coach here.
Same reporters too.
Pretty much.
Funny. Yeah.
But he was really just like, guys, I have pretty much the same expectations as I have since day one when I came in, right? But I think on top of what he had, I think the last thing that I remember him speaking on was the kicking unit and how Asher Murray and David Alano were, but going in depth on how how good Jacob Graham was for them at long snapper and them getting all of their special teams in the motion for that. So he said that David and Asher had really good summers, and Asher had a really, really good spring. And so he feels pretty good about both of those guys going into this year, which is a lot better than what they had this past season, right? There was a lot of uncertainty when it came to the kicking unit with A&M. It showed up in a lot of the games where A&M had a lot of nail biters, a lot of the time in that college football playoff game where Miami, I know it was windy for both sides, but still there was some of the kicks up close inside the 30-yard line were just unable to go in. And that's just kind of unacceptable. And so they addressed it, and I think they feel really good about that unit going into this season.
Yeah, again, underrated. I said it today. Like, talking about the backup quarterback battle, talking about the kicking. The secondary is not really an underrated topic because that is obviously a major part of their succession plans and stuff like that. And well, succession plans, bad word. Obviously, we've talked a ton about the secondary, and we've really focused on the transfer additions and stuff like that. But kicking was a major issue, like you said, last season. It did decide a couple games. It was a big problem against Miami. It was a problem against Texas. It was a problem in certain times, even when they were winning games, where you just couldn't rely on it, and you really had to rely on your offense to get it done. They were lucky to have that. But there are going to be games this season, especially late in the year, where both teams are possibly beat up, and you're going to have to kick field goals, and you're going to have to kick 40-plus yard field goals, and you're going to have that be a plus part of your game plan. So I think this is really kind of just run of the mill for Mike Elko today. I kind of love it because you're right. I mean, we've all been covering this team now going on almost 5 years for me with Aggies Wire, doing this podcast now. This is going into year 2. It's most of the same. And if he's not mentioning certain players or certain positions, that's probably, like I said, a good sign, because like the defensive line has a lot of new players on it. But if you listen to Anto Saka or CJ Mims or, any players praising some of these new guys, TJ Searcy, for example, one of the senior defensive ends that's returning this season, who could end up having a great year as their starting defensive end. And obviously Saka bringing a lot of NFL potential to this pass rush unit, and obviously being led by DJ Hicks, who, senior defensive tackle. This is a huge season for him. I think he believes that with his coaching and with their maturity and their dedication, it's going to be much the same from what we saw last year, even though we don't have, obviously, Cassius Howe leading the way with 11.5 sacks. If it's more of a collective effort, I don't think he cares. I mean, that was nice for Cassius Howe to have that and be that leading sacker, but, if each guy gets 6 to 7 sacks, 5 in that kind of 5 range, like I seriously getting 5 to 6 sacks, Saka getting 6 to 7 sacks, that's fantastic. That means they're getting constant pressure. And from the run
from multiple angles.
Exactly. And from the run defense perspective, you already said it. If the linebackers are bigger, and they all are, they're all at least 6'2". Outside of Sanford, I think he's about 5'11", but he's bigger this offseason. There's more size there. There's more of a run defense prowess with a guy like Ray Coney, who I think PFF had it was like a 90 or 88 run defense grade. Like, he will plug those holes. That's going to help everything out. And if the interior defensive line can get some pressure up the middle, that's just going to let all those guys eat on the outside. So there's too much talent there to fail, in my opinion. There's too much production. You look at a guy like CJ Mims, how productive he was with an average North Carolina team last year. That's a very good sign, in my opinion. So I think that's why you didn't hear a ton about that, because basically he's telling you, look, the allotted media practices, you're going to see these guys stand out. You're going to see what I'm talking about here, especially with the secondary. And with everything else, my starting quarterback is going to his second full season. He's got one of the best wide receiver cores in the country. We've got size. That's not an issue anymore. That's not a talking point. And, I wrote about it for Aggies Wire. Jerome Miles is still on this team, guys. Jerome Miles, former 5-star wide receiver Jerome Miles, is still on this team. He's got a chance to really shine in this fall camp, because looking through their wide receivers right now, this is the most talented group they've ever had in program history, in my opinion. I mean, I'm even going back to the Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans days. A lot of blue chip talent on that roster as well. But this is, I mean, he doesn't have there's not one game on the schedule where Marcel should not pass for at least 250 yards, in my opinion.
There is a high chance that one of those elite defenses might hold him to that, but I think that I think Alabama is one that comes up pretty consistently as having one of the better defenses, same as Oklahoma. You go both to those places. So
I kind of think if you match, but my point is like I kind of think if you match up,
I know what your point is.
Horton, yeah,
I think you raise a valid point with
I know
the wide receiver core being there. Maybe it's a lofty goal, but I think that's definitely something that is in the realm of possibility for them. So
yeah,
I think
I'm just saying I just think that, and no, and I could be totally wrong, but I just think when you are going in, I think of like Bryce Young. I think of all these quarterbacks. I'm not comparing Marcel Reed to Bryce Young, but I'm saying the second full starting season, even with the new OC, which I think a lot of what's getting underreported here is that he served as the co-OC last year. He was a part of the play calling. He was a part of the conversations. He was sitting right next to Colin Klein during every game. He was seeing how things played out. That narrative, as we saw from a Texas reporter today, was the most ridiculous thing I've heard. So it's a continuity thing, especially from Marcel Reed of, I've got my main wide receiver back in Mario Craver, who I connected with for 917 yards and 4 touchdowns. Yeah, Casey Concepcion isn't on the team anymore, but we knew that was happening. We knew he was going to the NFL after last season. And now I've got Zay Horton, who I know, who I played with, who I've known for a long, long time, going back to our early playing days. And I have a bond with this guy. We're going to develop more chemistry. We've already developed chemistry this offseason. It's going to be more chemistry during the preseason. Him having that 6'4" frame in the red zone is going to be massive. And outside of really the tight ends, which, they did talk about that room today, and it's kind of a mismatch of guys who are going to have to prove themselves this fall.
Yeah.
It's led by Micah Riley, who spoke today, who's obviously one of the better leaders on this team, who's most likely going to earn that starting tight end job. But Houston Thomas is now on this team.
Keone Armstrong had a very big offseason in terms of growth.
And he's massive.
They also bring in Richie Anderson as well. So
yeah,
I think it's Micah Riley was very accurate in what he said today, and I think we'll end on this is that he said that their room. I mean, he's a 5th-year guy now. He's gone through a torn labrum. He's gone through injuries, gone through trials and tribulations. And he is just so ready to be able to prove what this tight end room can do on the field. And I think that is the mentality of why he was elected a captain. I mean, even coming in 2 seasons ago from Auburn as someone who was overlooked, I guess, in that transfer cycle, we didn't really get to see him a lot these past couple of seasons since he transferred in. But I think this one is going to be one of the seasons where he's going to be highlighted a lot more.
Yeah, especially as a receiver. I think he's really waiting. And I remember when he came from Auburn, I was speaking with one of the Auburn reporters. He said he's underrated wide receiver. Like, this is somebody, great hands, very pristine route runner, like somebody who is going to give you something, especially in the middle of the field. So I think the rest of this group, and I actually wrote about it last night, what these like the 3 biggest questions A&M's going to answer. I think one of them is how much 12 personnel are we going to see? Is this going to be a trust thing with the wide receivers, or do you just want to have 3 wide receivers on the field at all time because you want to utilize that talent? Or is 12 personnel going to be more of an adjustment early in the year because you want to run the ball, you want to have those 2 tight ends to get your best blocking scheme on the field and really play bully ball with 2 running backs, 3 to 4 running backs that you feel really good about, especially in the season opener. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And if it doesn't work, are we just going to spread them out? Because just utilize your talent at wide receiver.
Yeah.
A lot that we're going to be covering here, obviously, going into the next, 3 weeks.
Yeah, we got three-ish weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, which is it's coming up pretty quick. We'll be covering a lot more of these previews like we did with David today. So if you did like that, guys who y'all are watching, please subscribe. We are going to build this even more and more until we hit more of the bigger numbers that we're aiming towards in this college football season. We'll have a lot of content over the fall, so make sure you guys are dialed in for that. Make sure to also click the notifications bell so you know exactly when we go live as well.
So yeah, as always, like, share, and subscribe. Texas A&M Aggies Live. You do that, you're gonna get every video throughout the week. What we talked about, especially with David, it was about 32 minutes of his Arizona State preview. A lot to talk about, weaknesses, strengths, get you ready for that game. I know, going into the season, you kind of look at the schedule, and outside of some of the bigger names, a lot of fans are like, I don't know who's on this team. So we're doing our best to get all these previews out. Obviously not going to get all before the season because we have a lot to cover with fall camp that officially kicks off tomorrow with the first practice. So as always, you can follow me at Cameron Honesty on X. You can follow all my work at Aggies Wire, part of USA Sports. You can follow Cannon at Torres Cannon. Always plug your Patreon.
Yeah, you can also follow me over on Patreon covering A&M recruiting for football, basketball, and more over at the Bell Tower on Patreon.
All right, guys, we'll see you next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. As always, Yigam, and see you then.